So, Dr. Cooper, I'd love to know from you your perspective on all these massive and sweeping cuts to scientific research that are happening right now in the U.S. What's your perspective on that?
Oh, it's terrifying, really. I see the patients, my own patients, and I think of their conditions and how much they've benefited from some of the past science just because their treatments have been successful for cancer or for some complex cardiovascular risk, diabetes. But I look at what's happening now and I'm so worried about the future. I'm so worried. And it's also very difficult for healthcare providers right now because of so much misinformation that's actually coming from the government.
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. It's great to see you two.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, we're going to take on a pretty heavy topic today, but we're going to do it with a smile on our faces. We're going to be talking about cuts to science and the impact that that has on us, on our health, on our metabolic health as well. And this all started when a guy that you know, Dr. Cooper, that you've known for decades in the field of metabolic science, just quit. He worked for the National Institutes of Health, which is a government research entity. But I'd love for you to just set the table with that story. Kevin Hall, Dr. Kevin Hall, you've known for decades, said, "I've had enough."
Yeah. And I haven't known him personally, but just I've been aware of all his research for decades. And when he first started out, I was always kind of bantering back and forth with the comments. I don't think he probably appreciated because I was concerned about his research. Started out trying to find kind of what's the equation that explains, calorie in, calorie out, and how do you manipulate that with food and exercise. And I was just concerned about wanting to take into consideration all of the metabolic hormones and the biologic adaptation that occurs in real life clinical work of people who are put on various diets. And so, but over the years, I started to really appreciate his scientific research because he really has perfected nutrition science research so that you can really look at different dietary changes and any impact on health and do it in a way that is very reliable and that you can really trust the output. And that's hard because that's one of the hardest areas of research to get really dialed in on, because if you imagine people eat several times a day, and in the free world, they may say, I'm eating this or I'm eating that, but there could be little differences. Maybe they didn't really like something, so they didn't finish it. And so how are you going to record that in a research study? So he's the one that figured out you've got to really bring people in and sequester them in more of a medical setting and really control for every single variable when you're doing the studies. And that's so difficult to, first of all, get people to agree to do that, but then to carry that out. So his research took him into ultra-processed food to try to figure out things. And he's the one that figured out it's not just like fiber and all this that people thought it was, because he was able to create the same kind of fiber content of the diet, but just alternate certain types of processing that the food went through and try to study just that little aspect and the differences there. And so, it was very tedious work that he did over the years, and it really clarified a lot of things and demystified a lot of things. And so to hear that what happened recently with him ending up getting to the point where he felt he had to resign from the NIH after more than 2 decades, it was so sad. And the reason was that he felt he was basically being censored. He was told that he couldn't represent his research in an honest, transparent, authentic way that accurately reflected what his research showed. Instead, he was told that certain things he should not report and other things he should sort of stretch or alter. And so that he really felt there was an agenda that was trying to steer him to report something that wasn't really accurately what his research did show, because the NIH didn't like the message that the actual research was showing. So they wanted some other narrative. And so it's just completely against a scientist's backbone to do anything like that. I mean, a scientist goes into their study very unbiased. They may say, I wonder whether X or Y causes Z. I would think it could cause Z because I know this and I know that about X and Y, and so it may do this, but let me prove it. Then they go into the study, and if it proves that it doesn't cause Z, they're not concerned. They still report that. They don't hide that study and try to, manipulate it to show what their original concept was. No, they report it showing what exactly the study showed. And so they're not tied to the result. They're just focused on the research process being very pure, very accurate. And then it's going to tell, the science is going to speak for itself, what actually happened. But for the NIH to try to override that with a preconceived idea of what they want the message to be, and that goes against what his study was saying, that's just totally anti-scientific. And so he just had no choice but to resign. And so I don't know the full story, but you could probably look him up and see. I know that he has reported to some media outlets what actually happened. But he had to resign because he was unwilling to do that, of course. And if he hadn't resigned, I'm sure he would have been fired.
Yeah. And I think the fact that the current administration is trying to control the narrative of science, that sounds shocking on the face of it. And I can't remember even a time in political history when a political administration was pressuring scientists at NIH to come up with a certain result or to come up with a certain narrative. But now we're seeing the same thing when it comes to autism as well, right?
Yep. We're seeing the same thing with autism. And that's just so crazy, because now there's misinformation from the government about autism being caused by dietary intake and certain types of dietary changes or consumption of certain types of foods, or maternal dietary intake, or maternal mood even. And then there's also misinformation out there that immunizations cause autism, or that other environmental things cause autism. And it's just, all of it is completely inaccurate. And so I just don't know if the people promoting it are totally ignorant and uneducated, and that's why they're promoting it, or if they actually have some kind of sinister agenda with this. But it's leaving autistic people and families with autistic people in them, or loved ones, it's leaving them feeling really vulnerable, because it's like there's a target on the back of autistic people and their families. And it's also just not valuing autistic people, because if you think about it, autistic people, we don't need to cure autism. That should not be the mentality that, oh my gosh, we've got to cure autism. Autism is just a difference in processing, a different way of thinking and viewing and seeing and interacting with the world than the typical person. So it's just a different type. And in some ways, those are enhancements to the typical person. They're not detriments. There's some ways that, because we autistic people live in a world where it's populated by mostly non-autistic people, it is a little bit difficult. I mean, I shouldn't say a little. I'm sure it's difficult. I'm sure it is technically a disability, because you're in a world where your type of processing is the minority, and everything else is designed for a different type of processing. And so that is true. But at the same time, the greatest breakthroughs in science, technology, arts, so many of those have been achieved by autistic people. And so our whole culture and our whole awareness has been advanced probably centuries because we've had autistic people in our population and in our community that are able to view things with a different perspective that actually accelerates these breakthroughs. And so to not celebrate that and not show a debt of gratitude to autistic people for that is really just, it's so offensive.
So I think we've got two things going on. We've got a government trying to control the narrative, not just in science, but in many, many other areas. The picture of Harriet Tubman was taken off a federal website dedicated to the Underground Railroad, a picture of the first female pilot of the Thunderbirds, prestigious military flying group. Her story was taken down because it was perceived as being a DEI story. Same for the picture of Harriet Tubman. How do you tell the story of the Underground Railroad without Harriet Tubman? I mean,
I don't understand how you erase people.
Yeah, and we don't want to get too far down. What I hope that we can get across is that when we talk about science, there is an accepted method of doing science, of measuring science, and of believing science. And we have a segment in our society that just chooses not to believe valid scientific research. And there's a method to it. And they'll say, oh, yeah, there was a study in Denmark that XYZ, and they're like that, and they just throw all logic out the window and latch on to something. But I guess what I'd like to encourage people is that the truth is out there, and you just need to find those valid sources. But what's really troubling is that you've got really great researchers like Dr. Hall who are just throwing up their hands now because someone up the food chain is telling them what the science should say, not letting the research dictate that.
Right.
I think the problem is when you have like this small fringe of negative people who have some sort of, I hate to say billionaire type of agenda or something that's controlling this narrative, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we've had some positive movement for years, making positive change, and now there's something that wants to quiet all this movement, and it doesn't make sense to me. When science is making change, when especially like the COVID thing, we had 1 million people die, and now we want to stop all that positive movement. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, cuts to COVID research over the past couple of months. Something like 800 research projects at NIH got cut, several $1 billion in funding, and COVID-19 research was one of those things. Tuberculosis research, research on ALS was halted. The list goes on and on.
There's not one thing that was going on at NIH touches pretty much every single person you know. Everyone that you know has some sort of project that NIH was working on that would affect somebody you know or yourself.
Including heart disease, major research on heart disease.
Alzheimer's.
That got cut.
Alzheimer's. Every single thing. So why wouldn't you want your so-called trusted government to help you? Why is that something that should be cut? It doesn't make sense to me. Like that's the first marker in the government trying to say, let's figure out what's killing America or what's harming people, and we'll figure it out. And it, like we were talking about before, and then the drug companies come in and say, oh, this is something that can help people, and obviously we can make money on it. I mean, look, that's their job. They're a business. So then they develop a drug that can help that disease or help that thing or whatever and make the world a better place. I mean, yes, I am a, make the world a better place, kumbaya person, but I just don't understand why you think that disease is a place to cut. Like, to me, disease is a place you pour in the money. Like, we want Americans to be happy and healthy. We want disease to be eradicated in our lifetimes. And we've seen some of diseases be eradicated in our lifetime. We've seen some of this. Like, we've seen it happen. So don't we want to see more of it happen? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it will really slow down.
Right. And it also doesn't make sense to me to bring back some things that I thought we got rid of, like measles. I mean, measles? There are people dying of measles in Texas and some in New York, by the way. I read about that because people don't want a vaccine that, since I was a kid, and I'm old, by the way, you don't want a measles vaccine that for almost 60 years has been safe and effective for 99% of the people. You go, oh, you know what? Maybe that's not good. You should, have vitamin A, and then all those people are going in the hospital for vitamin A overdoses. Like, what?
Yeah.
What?
I wonder what it is. Is it
What's
ignorance?
going on?
Well, is it ignorance or arrogance or?
And meanwhile, the person who, I'm sorry, I will say, the RFK Jr. head of the thing, he was vaccinated for measles. He was fine. What? I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I think it would be easier to take if the agency in charge of government efficiency now, DOGE, I think it'd be easier to take if they let us know what their criteria were. Like, we're cutting these projects because of this. But, I mean, they fired the people taking care of the nuclear arsenal and then said, oh, whoops, and then hired them back.
Well, the ones that they could find, because a lot of them, they lost their emails.
But I feel like when it comes to the scientific cuts, there's just been no rhyme or reason.
No. And
as to why this seemingly important area of research was not deemed valuable. Because I thought the cuts were supposed to be made to get rid of waste and inefficiency in the federal government. But so far, we haven't seen a scientific research project and said, oh, that's a waste of time.
I haven't seen, you know what, breast cancer, that's no good. That's no good. Let's not figure that out. Or Parkinson's, we want everybody to have that.
Well, and I don't understand, too, because I don't get it with the diversity focus that they have, the anti-diversity focus. That's also the opposite of true science and in healthcare. We have struggled for so long to make sure we are inclusive and, have representation, diverse representation in scientific studies, because for so long, many, many decades ago, we didn't have that. And that led to not understanding how diseases affect different people of diverse backgrounds. And we have to have that mixture. Otherwise, it's not high quality research. And so for them to come out so against diversity, when diversity isn't it what made America America?
I thought so. Bring us your tired, your poor. I read the Statue of Liberty on our school trips every year since third grade.
Yeah. And what is diversity? Is it just everything that's not, sorry, but white males? Is it that are neurotypical without any neurodivergence? I mean, is that what?
I don't know.
What is allowed, and then anything outside of that is considered a threat or something?
I don't know.
It is, because otherwise we may as well go to the AI robots and, get rid of humans and humanity, because we are diverse just by nature as a human species.
I thought it was
Even
a good thing.
Animals are diverse. Animals have different gender identification, different. They're different. Some have spots, some don't in the same species. So anyway, it's just a strange perspective that's being pushed, but I think it's particularly affecting medical scientific research, because I've been told that our local big research centers, cancer research and all that, had to basically scrub diversity from all of their whatever, I don't know what, their operations, in order to not jeopardize all their funding. And that they did do that, and to appease whoever. But how is that then going to affect the quality of the research that they're turning out? Because does that mean that diversity can't be mentioned in any of the study participant recruitment or the study designs, or how far does that go? And then how can we trust the research output and how that applies to the general population if it's really a homogenous group that it's focusing on? And again, not, and just scrubbing the images, scrubbing the memories, scrubbing the celebration of people who have achieved different things with different backgrounds. I mean, that's so wonderful. Why are we scrubbing that information? Because now we won't have the inspiration to young people who identify with that want to go further in their own lives and their own careers and their own purpose in life to bring joy and achievements that will benefit their, others.
And it's, I've heard estimates that the NIH budget is less than 1% of the federal budget.
Yeah.
Less than 1%. And I take this personally. My wife dealt with breast cancer and is cancer-free for 5 years now. But that happened because of research done by NIH through the Hutch in Seattle, through Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, through the UW Medicine.
Yeah.
And she's literally alive, as are many other women, because of government research and support. And these organizations like the Hutch in Seattle, their heads are spinning because they're trying to figure out where they go from here, because literally the rug has been pulled out from under them. Mm-hmm. And I cannot think of, get emotional about this.
Well,
I can't think of anything more important.
Yeah.
Than cancer research.
Yeah.
Think
and the advances that have been made in the past 10 years because of what was like the information that was based on what was done even before. And that is mostly, yes, there are private funds, but it really comes from government funds because that is the only way that this starts. It really, really is. Yeah. And there's so much research into cancer stuff because that's where it all begins. I have so many friends who've had breast cancer. I have a couple of friends who've had leukemia. And this is where it begins. And they're all alive.
Yeah.
They're alive now. And I guarantee you, even 10 years ago, they would not be alive right now. They wouldn't be. Because that was a death sentence.
Yeah. And we won't see the results of this for many years because, as Andrea, as you were saying, how the basic science that the NIH funds needs to come in and fund a lot of science that then later, once it gets to a certain level, the drug companies can start seeing
pick up. Yes.
that they could make something that would help target that specific area that's been identified in the basic science as a potential therapeutic target. But that whole process is like
it's a 10-year process.
At minimum, it's like 15, 20-year process.
And I am a capitalist, and, you can hate me for it or whatever, but it starts at the government sort of laying the groundwork and saying, this is what's going, this is what we have, this is the information, and then they take it and run with it and make it viable. And if the information isn't there, nobody can run with it. No one can go with it.
So
it's not going to happen.
So our children, 10, 15 years from now,
not going to have it.
They'd be disadvantaged, that next generation, because of what's happening now. They're going to be disadvantaged in terms of therapeutic options for different diseases. And
right. You think about polio. Think about polio. Have you ever met anyone with polio? No. We've never met. I mean, I've never met anyone
I have.
our age.
Well, no, I have as a physician when I was in training, worked with several patients with post polio syndrome that didn't have, at that time, the
Right.
advantage of vaccines. And it is a devastating
It's
disease.
deadly.
And it doesn't
Our
come
age.
right. And the disability doesn't start right after polio. It takes I think, I can't remember, but it's more than a decade or 2 decades after the infection that the paralysis comes on. And that the immobility occurs. And so here we are cutting like COVID funding, and we're so it's fresh in our system, and we've got so many people dealing with longer term COVID issues now, but we still don't know if there's any longer term sequelae that can occur. And so with polio, they didn't know. And once they started to see and link the post polio syndrome with polio infections decades earlier, the need for the immunizations was so strong. And so you wouldn't want to see anyone with polio at all. And it's also sad that the attack on vaccines has happened, because I think, as you said, Andrea, who would imagine that we're seeing children die of measles in the
Measles.
United States? I mean, I can't believe it. When I
It's
was in
something, right. It's something that you would say, oh, it must be a third world nation in a tiny outpost in the, either in like the Sahara or I don't know, something like that. Not here in our own country.
well, and measles is a terrible disease. I remember in training, 30 years ago, in London, we had in the hospital I trained in, there was a ward of people with measles, and it was super infectious. So we had to be totally protected if we went anywhere near there. But the kids were so sick, really, really sick. And you would never want that for your child. And when we have a very safe vaccine, and it's been, I don't really understand why it's been targeted as something that it isn't, and why all this misinformation occurs around the measles vaccine. But it's one of the safest vaccines we've ever had and the most tested. So there's really no reason why we have this going on. And at the same time, we have people that are just deciding they're against vaccines, mainly because there are these sources in the government that are really coming out saying so many false statements about vaccines to scare people. But the vaccines are tracked through something called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And we can see everything that has been reported within a certain time frame of a vaccine. It's reported, whether it's from the vaccine or it's not from the vaccine. It's all reported, and it's in this database that's very transparent, very reliable, that we can all look at. And I've used that many times to try to put people at ease that were reading information that was completely not true about the COVID vaccines or about other vaccines. And so now I read that the government is interfering with that reporting system and trying to alter this information to potentially make it appear that the vaccines are causing problems that they're not causing. So why this agenda? I don't really understand it, but I think that we're at a crossroads where it will be harder and harder and harder to give people accurate information that they will believe, or even for doctors and scientists to have access to the kind of information we used to have from the CDC, from the NIH, from even the FDA. I'm a little bit worried about now. So what should we do? That's one of the big...
Yeah, because there were also some cuts made. I know this is a little off topic, but there were some cuts made that I saw to some of the FDA positions about safety in food and safety in things that I was worried about as well.
And climate change, too, is a big area because climate affects our health. And So a lot of climate scientists are linked to the health aspects
Yes.
of climate change. And so we also need that information as healthcare providers as well.
I just keep writing to my congressmen and my senators, who I'm very lucky. I live in California, so I do have enlightened congressmen and enlightened senators, but I still write to them all the time, telling them to yell louder and scream. But I think that we all need to do stuff like that,
Yeah.
and just remind them to yell and scream.
And for all of our sake, I hope that some of these researchers, like Dr. Kevin Hall, if he's still interested in continuing his career, or the Parkinson's expert in the world that was also let go, I hope that they go to other countries. I hope other countries take them in and provide them research labs and everything they need to continue their research there. Because I do see that many countries are now investing as a reaction to our pulling back. They're now investing a lot into scientific research now.
Where are they going?
Germany, Canada, even. I saw something that Germany is putting, they're creating some kind of like a super science project. So trying to attract these researchers from our country, basically, to
That's
get them over
interesting.
there, which I hope that they do that. I hope there is some kind of a partnership and it's inconvenient to have to like move, but we can't afford to lose the knowledge that's stored in all of these amazing scientists at this level of their career. We really need them to continue their work, even if they have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I just hope they're not going to China. That's
Well, yeah.
Well, I hope that people keep demanding the truth, and that people won't rest until we get the truth. And we need a government that we can trust. It's a government of and by and for the people, I thought. But, and I should say, as we wrap things up here, that this is not a political agenda that we have. If a Democratic administration had made these cuts, I would have said the exact same thing that I just
too.
said in the last 30
Me
minutes.
too.
It has nothing to do with political affiliation. But the fact that the politicians running our government now have decided to make these decisions, then it is on us to speak up, regardless of who those politicians are. And we deserve the truth, whether it is based in science or the economy or any other area, any other discipline. We deserve the truth.
right. And I'm a very patriotic person, and I always loved my country and thought that this was the most innovative place, and the place for ideas to come forth and for new things to happen and wonderful things to happen. And I still think that it can happen, and I want it to happen. So I think that that's why I'm so passionate about things changing. Things still can happen and things should happen. So I think that's why I'm passionate about it.
Dr. Cooper, any final thoughts as we wrap up?
I think what we'll do on this episode is just post some good resources for information. Some of these scientists who may no longer be working in the government, but they're still speaking out, and they're still filtering information and providing some reliable, trustworthy information on different topics in their specialty areas. So I'll post a few of those with the show notes.
Right. And I would say write to your congressman, or call your it's really easy to call Congress. You can just look online, and you can call the 202 numbers. It's really easy to find them. And call your congressmen and your senators and just say, I believe in science. Please don't let any more people be fired.
And this is also a reason to have a closer relationship with your own healthcare provider.
Yes.
That you can ask questions, or, if there's something doesn't sound right, or if you really want to get to the truth of something. Most practitioners and healthcare providers are knowledgeable, and they know where to look for reliable information, and they can relay that to you.
And I think, just for me, finally, I would do a self-inventory and ask yourself, Which family members in your life have been saved by science, have been benefited by science? I mean, the quality of life, the three of us here, all of us, our lives have been improved by scientific research over the years. And science matters. It has a profound impact on our quality of life and our health. So I appreciate the conversation, you two. And next time will not be as heavy a show, but it will be packed with information as it usually is. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have feedback, comments, info@diabetestheinstitute.org, and also Dr. C at fatsciencepodcast.com. All right, this has been another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.